I'm doing chapter 5, and I'm going to be talking about extinction. And extinction is a process that weakens operant behavior. And by definition, it's a behavior that has reinforced for a period of time and was no longer reinforced, and therefore the behavior stopped occurring. So, extinction is a basic principle of behavior, but also how you utilize extinction when you're describing it in its relation to behavior is important, because you can't say something like behavior is extinct. You have to say that you extinguished behavior, or you have to say you put behavior on extinction, not a person. There are normally a process of events that happens after extinguishing. And the first is an extinction burst, where there is frequency, and then there's duration, and then there is intensity. An example of this is, let's say Kate every morning goes into her bathroom and turns on her light switch to start her morning routine. She does it at the same time every morning. One morning, Kate goes in there and she turns on her light, but it doesn't turn on. And Kate repeatedly flips the light switch on and off, and then she starts going faster as she notices it's still not turning on. And then she huffs in frustration, and she's like, well, damn, like, what am I supposed to do now? The repetition of Kate moving the switch on and off is frequency. And then whether she does it faster, and then as she goes faster and there's no result, that is the intensity. When she's going faster and there's no result, that's intensity. And then when we see Kate be frustrated and huff in frustration, what we're seeing is an emotional response during the extinction burst. The emotional response does have a purpose. So Kate, who is independent in her morning routine, and she's huffing in frustration and she's talking to no one, it is not necessarily going to provide the reinforcement that she's expecting, but an emotional response is not always conscious. After an emotional response, and before that, a emotional burst, there is spontaneous recovery. And spontaneous recovery is defined as the natural tendency for behavior to occur again. Situations that are similar to those in which it has occurred and reinforced before the extinction. So if a spontaneous recovery happens, and then the emotional response will, if a spontaneous recovery occurs and that there is a reinforcement, the behavior will continue. But if there is no reinforcement after a spontaneous recovery, the behavior will slow and then dissipate. Something like positive and negative reinforcement, though, have really different effects with extinguished behavior. Like, if Kate remembers to pay her light bill, and now every morning when she wakes up, she knows for a fact she turns on her light and she knows her light's gonna turn on, then she is more inclined to pay her light bill or to do like an automatic payment. But if you have something that's a negative reinforcement, let's say that you go to the gym every single day and it's at 3 p.m. the same time every day. But when you start going to the gym at 3 p.m. every day, you run into someone. You run into like your ex-boyfriend, or you run into someone that like talks too much, or the same person's always taking up the equipment and you can't use it. So then you stop going to the gym at 3 p.m. every day. And then one day you go back to the gym, and whenever you are at the gym, you're like, oh, there's nobody here, so I'm gonna start coming back. That was a negative reinforcement, and the negative reinforcement was you being averse to consequence. And the extinction is that you're no longer avoiding someone. When you're trying to either understand, encourage, or maybe even discourage behavior and you would like to extinguish it, the application of positive versus negative reinforcement is important. If you positively reinforce something, the behavior will continue. If you negatively reinforce it, if you positively reinforce something, then the behavior will continue. But if you negatively reinforce it, it's likely the behavior will stop. If you're simply an observer and you're not a perpetrator, and so you're not in control of enforcing the behavior, if you cannot find the source of the reinforcement, you cannot extinguish the behavior. And extinguish your behavior is not just ignoring it. There is a reinforcement schedule. Reinforcement schedules have reinforcement schedule has 3 different things. One of them is a functional equivalent to the reinforcement. It's an allowing there to be an extinction of one behavior and then offering one that is deemed appropriate but is similar to the first. So you have behavior A and behavior B. So if you do not want to enforce behavior A, you offer behavior B, which is similar to it. But if you no longer enforce an alternative like B, A will reoccur. And then there's something like reinforcement after extinction. This is, again, after spontaneous recovery. And basically, if you do it after spontaneous, this is just, again, after spontaneous recovery. And if you do something like that after spontaneous recovery and you encourage it, when you're reinforcing extinction, you again are just reinforcing it normally after spontaneous recovery, and so the behavior will reoccur again. But then there's intermediate reinforcement. So this is if you do something and you no longer have your reinforcement, you no longer have the result that you want, so you don't do it, but you go back to it and then it happens again, and then you go back to it again, it doesn't happen, you go back to it again, it happens twice in a row. The behavior is not going to extinguish because there is a resistance to extinction. And that was chapter 5's discussion on extinction. And that was chapter 5 on extinction. That was chapter 5 for extinction.